Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We got a lot to do here today. There's some crazy talk out there as it relates to one of Georgia's national championship competitors. We're going to cover that here coming up in just a moment. Also, wild recruiting weekend. Good news for Georgia. But the good news kind of stands in sharp contrast to the behavior of another one of Georgia's rivals. This is at least interesting. I'm not quite so sure we can conclude today what all of this means, but I do think we see a sharp contrast. If you're a Georgia fan, I think you ought to notice that. So we're going to cover all of that here over the course of the next couple of minutes, and John Stinchcomb stops by today there as well. We'll celebrate really an all-time great in a Georgia uniform. He made a big announcement over the course of the weekend, and practice begins this week. We got to get serious about all of that there as well. I can't do this today, but at some point in time this week, we're going to talk about this. I've sort of noticed a little bit of a vibe shift as it relates to Georgia practice for this particular season. I don't know if you've noticed it well, but we'll kind of throw it out there. We'll sort of decide what it all means. That's coming at some point in time this week. I'm not quite sure when that'll be. But for today, it's a lot of Georgia recruiting talk. Good news for the Dogs. Loud noises coming from one of Georgia's rivals. I guess we'll, I don't know. We'll figure it all out here. Glad to have you with us. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Is it the movie Anchorman where Brick Tamlin, one of the characters in the movie, is like, loud noises? Is that the movie that I'm thinking of? Anyway, a lot of loud noises coming out of Auburn here this weekend. A lot of yelling and a lot of noise. And, I kind of think of myself as a little bit of a hype man. Boy, they were hyping him up at Auburn this weekend. Hyping him up like we hadn't seen since I don't even know when. So we're going to get to that in a couple of minutes, try to figure out what all of that means, especially as the part that relates to Georgia. But prior to that, it just sort of seems like UGA kind of the exact opposite in a lot of ways. Now, listen, I like, kind of hype and noise and things like that, but there is something that I very much respect about the way that Georgia goes about its business here. Just kind of quietly taking care of it, kind of quietly handling its business. It's like L.J. McCray, big-time four-star defensive lineman, was on campus this weekend. He put out some nice stuff on Twitter. Seems like he really enjoyed himself, and Georgia made a nice impression on him. Got very little in the way of headlines. Georgia fans were at the pool or whatever else. I'm not even sure they even noticed that necessarily. But just kind of quietly, Georgia going about its business. Sunday night, Georgia sort of ho-hum, relaxed, casually, picks up a four-star linebacker, a guy kind of knocking on the door of being a top 100 commit, a recruit, I should say. It just, kind of ho-hum, business as usual. No one's blowing, it up out of proportion. No one's losing their mind. Georgia fans are obviously happy about it. You celebrate the news, and yet it ultimately doesn't probably generate nearly the excitement of like Auburn fans would have had you believe this weekend. They had a guy, and obviously we'll get more of this moment, who almost committed. And Auburn fans are out there high-fiving the almost commits. Georgia actually got, a pretty big-time commit. It doesn't get quite as much attention and all that. But, Georgia did add, obviously, a very good player this weekend. Kris Jones, as said before, four-star linebacker. This is a guy we actually played some audio from, I think it was on Friday's show. I guess it would have been Thursday or Friday anyway, where, Jones had talked about the fact that Georgia had, just lost to Marcus Riddick. He went to Auburn there as well. Auburn's been doing a lot of stuff here as of late. But what Jones told us from his interview with Before the Edges presented by Kroger on Wednesday is that Georgia had been in contact with him about the Riddick situation for a long time. That Georgia obviously kind of knew, what the status was there, and a guy like Jones sort of viewed that as good news of, well, if Riddick doesn't want to be a part of this class, if he doesn't want to, continue on the string of national championships, my hand's in the air. I'd love to be able to do this. And Georgia obviously, kind of followed through on that, got the commitment there on Sunday. Jeff Sentell did a terrific job on video last night. Jeff's been busy since coming back from vacation, doing a lot of great stuff. As I said before, a great episode of Before the Hedges this past Wednesday. Good stuff last night on the subject of Christopher Jones. So to kind of give you an idea of, what Jones brings to the table here for UGA, let me give you a little bit in the way of analysis from Jeff, who provided this on video last night. This is Jeff Sentell.
Really strong positional versatility here for Christopher Jones. The things that sticks out, you watch him on film, could be the Will backer, could be the Mike backer, the traditional downhill stand-up backer, but he has got a lot of pass rush excellence to his game. He's going to be a two-way linebacker. He's going to play linebacker for his high school team at Fairfax High in Fairfax, Virginia. He's also going to be a running back, shooting for maybe 1,200 yards rushing, 120 tackles. That's what he's capable of.
So a couple of things from what Jeff says there that I want to kind of break down here for a moment. First of all, I think one of the most interesting things about the recruits that Georgia goes after, or like any kind of like sort of big-time recruit kind of at this sort of high SEC level it's that ability to kind of play on both sides of the ball at the high school level that I think goes a long way towards determining how good of a college athlete you're going to be able to be. That sometimes you see more of the athleticism on the offensive side than you're able to sometimes see defensive-wise because, honestly, a halfway, decent coach is going to try to do everything he can to avoid you on the defensive side of the ball. I go back to, like, say, Keely Ringo when he was a prospect, coming out of Arizona. Keely obviously had a very good career at Georgia, became a historic figure because of his interception against Alabama, the 2021 national championship game. You go back and watch some of that high school film, it was what he was doing on the offensive side of the ball as a high school athlete that gave you an idea of how high his ceiling could be at a place like Georgia. He wasn't going to play on the offensive side of the ball at Georgia, but seeing him in the offensive side in high school gave you a pretty good indication about all that. I think that K.J. Bolden's a little bit like that right now. Bolden, wherever he goes to college, obviously Georgia fans hope it's Georgia. They see him as a safety. But when you watch him play for Buford here this season, you're going to see him as a wide receiver. And what he does as a wide receiver goes a long way towards kind of really showing you how great of a defensive back he can be in college. In the case of Jones here, I think it's the same kind of deal where, hey, you want to know how good of a linebacker he can be at the SEC level? Watch him carry the football during his senior season up in Virginia here right now. That shows you the overall athleticism. Now, the other thing that comes out here is, as Jeff said, hey, this is an inside linebacker, whether it be, kind of a Will or a Mike or whatever else, whatever specific position that he plays, but big-time ability as an interior pass rusher. Now, close your eyes for a moment. What looks more Georgia than that? When Georgia really needs to get after you, how many times, especially 2021 season, it seems like we saw a ton of this in 2021. When Georgia really needs to get after you, what do? They send that kind of like blitzing linebacker up the middle. That's what Nakobe Dean was so good at. He's like a missile, just shooting straight up the middle of an offense after a quarterback. That Georgia really likes to bring that pass pressure from the interior of its linebackers from time to time. And Jeff says, hey, that's what Jones already does well. You think of him as inside linebacker, but this is a guy who is going to have advanced pass rushing skills. To me, that fits in really well with what Georgia sort of looks like from its linebackers. Is 90% of the time in the games that Georgia plays against the opponents that it plays, that kind of stuff doesn't really matter all that much because Georgia's just killing people, so you don't necessarily need that. But when you really need to flummox a quarterback, when you really need to go out there and make it tough on an opposing offense, sending pressure from all over the place becomes the kind of way in which Georgia seemingly does that. And a lot of that interior pass rush where the big defensive linemen occupy the blockers, and then linebackers get to run in free. We saw so much of that in kind of the best performances from the Georgia defense in recent years. It sounds like Jones could be a nice fit in doing all of that. So very, very quietly, Georgia has itself a very good recruiting weekend, adding a linebacker the caliber of Jones, impressing some other recruits who are on campus this weekend. Now, on the flip side of that, Auburn has all kinds of noise, all kinds of excitement. It's the Big Cat weekend, after all. Now, I have to confess something. As it relates to Georgia, until this weekend, I had almost forgotten that Auburn existed. I had almost forgotten that Auburn was even a thing, right? I mean, before this weekend, I'm not trying to be funny or sarcastic or whatever else. I'm trying to be as honest as I can possibly be. For those of you that have followed this stuff this weekend, what happened was Auburn had one of its big kind of marquee recruiting weekends. They call it Big Cat Weekend. There were a number of either Georgia commits or Georgia targets who were there. The commits, Nye Carr, the wide receiver, was there. Jaden Perlotti, the 2025 linebacker out of Buford, he was there. K.J. Bolden was obviously there. We'll get more into the Bolden part of this coming up in a moment. So it was a very big weekend for Auburn. They flipped the five-star wide receiver away from Alabama. We're going to talk more about that later on in our show. I'm going to kind of, I guess be sort of blowhardy about this, but on the one hand, I'm not going to sugarcoat the fact that, Auburn had seemingly itself a very good weekend. But up until this weekend, when was the last time you had thought about Auburn at all? Like when was the last time that Auburn did something that got them on your radar whatsoever? I was saying this to our video audience before our show started today. Do you have to go back to 2019 when Georgia played on the road there. Had the 21-0 lead. Auburn scored a couple touchdowns to kind of drive late to have a chance to tie the game. Ultimately, it didn't. That's when Georgia won the East. Kirby gave you the HBTFD after the game. Has Auburn, and I'm not even saying they were all that relevant then, but have they been relevant at all in the eyes of a Georgia fan since then? So it's almost like a nostalgia. It's a throwback. Like, remember the old days back when Auburn was a thing? This weekend almost sort of felt like one of those type deals right there. It's like, wow, Auburn's back. Auburn's, trying to field a football team again. They're actually trying in football. The basketball school discovered they had a football team again. So there's something kind of like, I guess, sort of quaint and nostalgic with the fact that Auburn fans care about football here once again. But it does kind of demonstrate just how wildly different Georgia is from its rivals. And the truth is, if I was in a position where Auburn is with a brand new head coach, thankful that I don't have, the dunce that we used to have here. If I was an Auburn fan feeling that way about my program, obviously, Brian Harsin below the standard of what's needed in the SEC, Hugh Freeze, a huge upgrade compared to that, then guess what? I would be trying to be as noisy as I could possibly be. I would try to rattle as many pots and pans together as I could and throw around, allegedly, NIL dollars left and right all over the place, drop my wallet on the floor. I'd do anything I could to get the attention here because Auburn, rightly so, is desperate for attention. But just notice that the attention and the energy that Auburn created for this weekend did not slow Georgia down at all. I mentioned a guy like L.J. McCray having a good time taking a visit to Georgia, a linebacker like Christopher Jones, a real live top 100-ish, I think he's somewhere around 130 or so, 4-star linebacker, like big-time prospect in anybody's books, just quietly commits to Georgia over the weekend. That Auburn creating all the energy and the noise and the enthusiasm that it did not slow Georgia down really at all. Georgia content to be quiet. Georgia content to be businesslike. Georgia content to, they don't have big grand opening sale, right? Auburn's like the doorbuster savings. It's like Black Friday when it comes to Auburn. Georgia's an established brand. They don't have to do that. They don't have to have, 50% off coupons. They just take care of business. And folks show up like Christopher Jones did here this weekend. So maybe keep that in mind for what I'm about to tell you, because obviously KJ Bolden was apparently quite swayed by his trip to Auburn here this weekend. I believe one of the outlets had the report that he almost committed. He was almost persuaded. I guess that makes him the King Agrippa of 5-star recruits, which is a very specific kind of joke for a specific kind of person. But nonetheless, Bolden was apparently very impressed by what he saw at Auburn. I'll show you this from our friends over at On3. Hayes Fawcett, who's got a good relationship with a lot of these recruits, had this from Bolden, who's now very open, that Auburn outdid themselves on this visit. They are definitely top 2 on my list. That's KJ Bolden. I saw some people online were like, well, Florida State's the other one in this top 2. Georgia's not even in the running anymore for KJ Bolden. Obviously, I don't believe that's true, but I will go back to what I told you last week. There is some authentic mystery and intrigue with KJ Bolden's recruitment. There really is. The Georgia fans and the sort of online type Georgia folks who've kind of felt like Georgia was in a good spot here, I think the entire time they have had good reason to feel that way. I will tell you, going back to Friday's show, I probably came away feeling better about Bolden to Georgia than I had prior to that because of a point that Jeff Sentell made on the show. The fact that it's Kirby Smart in particular who's had such a close relationship with Bolden. And all these visits that Bolden's taken to Georgia, I believe Jeff has told us, maybe KJ himself said in the interview the other day with DawgNation, he's taken like 16 visits to Georgia, and in those particular visits, it's been the relationship with Kirby Smart in particular that's grown strong here. That Smart himself, the head coach, is a very big factor in this recruitment. And I think that's one of the things that has made Georgia fans feel pretty confident about this, which is that Kirby Smart has taken such a lead role in the recruitment of KJ Bolden. So if you're a Georgia fan, you would obviously feel really good about that. But at the same time, y'all, I'm not in the business of lying to y'all or, just sugarcoating things, tell the things you want to hear, whether it's true or not. At the same time, while there's reason to feel like it's, good potentially for Georgia and KJ Bolden, the pursuit of these other schools has always sort of felt very real too. That if all I was doing was risking my reputation, then yeah, I'll make a pick. KJ's going to go to Georgia. But if I was forced to risk my mortgage, my kids' future, they're don't even know how much of college fund we have, but theoretically, if there was a college fund in place, would I risk it for my, betting KJ Bolden to go to Georgia? No, I wouldn't, and that's true whether the push is coming from Florida State or as it did from Auburn here this weekend. So ultimately, the noise being made by Auburn probably does not impact the way I feel about anything very much at all. Clearly this weekend there is evidence it didn't slow down the Georgia recruiting machine. Georgia got a very nice commit, hosted some nice visitors itself, and didn't have to market the weekend as anything special. This is just what Georgia does every single weekend. And when it comes to what KJ Bolden's going to decide on August 5th, maybe he chooses Georgia, maybe he chooses somewhere else. That was always the possibilities, no matter what. But the things that has made Georgia, I think, are still in place here. And the reasons that Georgia fans have felt confident that Bolden might choose them, I think those reasons are just as strong as ever. I'll welcome Auburn back into the competition here in major college football. Some of us have been doing this for years. The fact that Auburn's taken the last few years off, I guess, is the kind of thing we have to look ourselves in the mirror about. But this is the way that it's supposed to go in the SEC. A program like Georgia's obviously got, a lot to sell and a lot to offer here right now. Other programs are going to try to chip away at that. Auburn's essentially kind of been lying dormant now for a good while, but apparently they don't want to be that way anymore. So I think the only thing a Georgia fan can do is welcome them back to the competition. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, episode 1999 of our program. That means tomorrow we celebrate our 2000th episode. I can't even believe it. It's really amazing. I'm excited about it. I promise y'all I'm not going to beat you over the head with this too much. A lot of y'all just want the show. You don't care what number it is. You don't care about the walk down memory lane. You don't care about all that kind of stuff. I totally get that. But, this is one of those deals where somehow I've managed not to get fired for all these years, so I'm at least going to take some moment to celebrate some of that tomorrow. And obviously a big thanks to our friends like Pella Window and Door of Georgia who make it all possible, because truly could not do this without great sponsors. By the way, if you want to go back to early days of the show, that's one of the things that probably stands out more than anything else. We didn't have any sponsors. For a good while, we were just sort of doing the show and just hoping people would tune in and join us. Thankfully, they did. And, after that, obviously, we've been able to kind of build some sponsorship here and make a living doing this. But early days of this show, no sponsorship whatsoever. So very, very thankful that not only an audience has found us, but we've been able to serve that audience by letting them know about some great sponsors who want to take good care of them, too, like our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia today. Now, listen, a show like ours, hopefully we're built on a firm foundation that's allowed us to last this long. Well, taking good care of a home, much like we try to take good care of our show, very important there as well. And that is what Pella Window and Door of Georgia is all about, including what kind of matters most, maybe that view, that look on the outside of your house. Obviously, curb appeal really important. It allows you to be a great neighbor, but it also allows you to potentially have better resale value when it's time to sort of think about all of that. And that's what quality windows and doors, the likes of which the Pella Window and Door of Georgia provides for you. So it's time to kind of get yourself acquainted with them, maybe to even have a consultation either in person or online with one of those Pella experts. Let them walk through the entire product line for you, your installation options, if necessary, your financing options there as well, and allow them in a no-pressure way to explain what makes the Pella product so much better, so special, why it's been recognized year after year and survey after survey by homeowners here in our market area as truly the market leader when it comes to all of this. Also take advantage of great savings here right now. And really, today's the last day to do this. It's 10% off your entire project, or no payments, no interest for 12 months. Last day to take advantage of that. So reach out and call today, 678-638-1429. That's 678-638-1429. Also find them online, pellaofga.com/DawgNation. That's pellaofga.com/DawgNation. Also stop by and see him. Experience Center right there in Duluth. But when you talk to him, tell him that BA from DawgNation Daily on his 99th episode said they would take good care of you, because I truly know that they will. Good stuff with our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. It's John Stinchcomb coming up. We'll remind you in a moment as well about a really fun contest we're doing here around DawgNation here right now. Only a few more days to take advantage and enjoy all of this. But for now, let's go around the DawgHouse. And I regret to inform you that the Ohio State Buckeyes, who have spent the entire offseason just whining Ryan Day has been the worst. Well, guess what? It continues. Now, I told you before, I don't have a ton of respect for Ryan Day. I just don't see him of the same stature as the other coaches, many of the others that Georgia does battle with. Obviously, a guy like Nick Saban, he's won a ton. Like, Saban has established himself as a truly worthy adversary. And if and when Saban ever hangs it up, maybe sooner than some Alabama fans think, when he does walk away from the coaching profession, figuratively speaking, Georgia fans will take their hat off to Saban. They would offer that handshake to say, my gosh, what a competitor, what a force to be reckoned with. The guy who in a lot of ways gave Georgia the gift of, hey, we got to be at our very best. We got to raise our standard and make sure we, as a program, both the donors who are giving, the coaches who are coaching, the players who are playing, the administrators who are administrating, everybody's got to be at their best because of the standard that Nick Saban has, sort of established at Alabama. In a lot of ways, Saban actually gifted Georgia with the motivation that it needed to become the program that it is right now. He deserves our respect in exchange for that, and I believe that Georgia fans will give it to him. You don't have to like him. You can make fun of him when it warrants. You can obviously do sort of battle with him, but when it's all said and done, Saban is worthy of your respect, and I believe the Georgia fans have given it to him. Ryan Day has not accomplished anywhere near as much. Ryan Day is not obviously worthy of the same level of respect, therefore we don't extend it to him. But Marvin Harrison Jr., a player on the Ohio State roster, I actually feel a bit different about. No one would dispute that Marvin Harrison Jr. is an outstanding player and a very, very tough competitor. Obviously, in the early stage of that game against Ohio State, back in December, Harrison was giving Georgia fits. And on the very short list of very best players in college football, Harrison is, of course, on that list. No Georgia fan would ever say a bad word about Marvin Harrison Jr. as a player. But when Harrison goes down the road of making the same kind of excuses that his head coach Ryan Day has been making all year long, that at that point in time, Georgia fans are also going to have just as much of an issue with Marvin Harrison Jr., even though he's actually good at his job. They're going to have just as much of an issue with Harrison Jr. as they would with Ryan Day. And unfortunately, you go back to Big Ten media days, evidence this is the case. Harrison's being interviewed by Dennis Dodd from CBSSports.com. Now, in some respects, I guess he's being sort of led in this direction by Dodd, but Harrison doesn't have much of a problem going this direction either. It certainly does not seem. Really just kind of, talking about the play that he got injured on, the clean hit by Javon Bullard that I saw a Big Ten official this week was like, it should have been a personal foul. Well, guess what? Of course the Big Ten guy is going to stick up for the Big Ten Conference, kind of in the bag for them. That's not a huge surprise necessarily, I don't guess. But Harrison Jr. with Dennis Dodd saying, if Javon Bullard hadn't played so rough, if this Georgia team wasn't so mean, then I would have been healthy and on the field, and our team would have won the game. This is Marvin Harrison Jr. with Dennis Dodd. Take a listen to this.
Do you guys feel like you maybe let one get away against Georgia?
Yeah, we did. I think it came down to a couple plays here and there towards the end of the game. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to play in that fourth quarter.
If you had played, would it have been a different story in the fourth quarter?
Yeah, I think we go on to win that game against Georgia, and I like our chances in the national championship.
I mean, it's just disgusting. It's just disgusting. And this is one of the real shames in life, which is, a team takes on the personality of its coach. That whatever a coach either instills or tolerates, that becomes the overall personality of a team. And you see this. A fiery competitor like Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to probably make $100 million over the course of his career playing in the NFL, has been reduced to nothing more than just a, sniveling, whiny, guy just like Day is. Unfortunately, Day has cultivated this sort of like weakness amongst his team, this sort of whining amongst his team. And now a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. comes across as no better, even though clearly we know him to be a very good player, but he's been reduced to this sort of beta role here because of the fact that he's simply following the footsteps of his head coach, Ryan Day. And in one respect, the sort of shame of this is we'll never know how Kirby Smart feels about all this, because when Smart speaks to the reporters this week, he's obviously going to kick off Georgia summer camp. If we went to Kirby and said, hey, Kirby, did you hear Marvin Harrison Jr.? He says they would have won the Peach Bowl if he hadn't gotten hurt. If Javon Bullard hadn't played so rough, then Marvin Harrison Jr. could have stayed in that game and they could have won the game. And Kirby would never answer that question. But on a show like this, that doesn't stop us from wondering what Kirby might think about this. And Kirby will never speak about this openly, but we're sort of sometimes left to conclude maybe there are some subliminal messages through the years that do give us a little bit of an idea about how Kirby might think about this kind of thing. In fact, let's go back to 2 summers ago. This is when Kirby was in Birmingham and he does that celebrity pro-am golf tournament there, and he was on the radio with the Cole Kubelik, Greg McElroy show. McElroy, one of the normal hosts, and McElroy, I guess, was getting ready to play in the golf tournament. And so Kirby was talking about McElroy not wanting to hit any balls on the driving range prior to playing golf. And you got to keep in mind, McElroy, the former Alabama quarterback, so what Kirby's about to say here had extra weight then because it was the former Alabama quarterback he was talking about. But Kirby kind of in the midst of talking about a completely different subject. Greg McElroy hitting balls in the driving range would seem like it has nothing to do with Marvin Harrison Jr., whining about Javon Bullard playing too rough. It would seem like these two things have nothing in common with each other. But when you hear Kirby Smart talking about this, you kind of get a little bit of a glimpse into how Kirby Smart feels about excuses of, well, it was a rebuilding year, or if not for Jamison Williams and John Mechie, now it's Marvin Harrison Jr., Kirby Smart sometimes will give you a little bit of a window into his soul, and we find out how he kind of thinks about excuses. So what you just heard from Marvin Harrison Jr., here's how we think Kirby Smart might respond to some of that. This is Kirby from last summer.
He's got a built-in excuse. He didn't hit balls, so I don't want to use excuses.
Wow.
I'm not an excuse guy. I want to go out there and hit balls and say, you know what, if I don't play well, it's on my talent level. It's not about excuses.
Let him know,
like
Coach.
Excuses.
That is a head coach right there.
That's what I'm talking
You already have predetermined what your competitors' excuses may be.
Yes,
so
sir.
You're set. You're ready to go.
There's nothing worse than listening to somebody make excuses.
Oh, so there you go. There you go. Now, this is out of context. This is unfair. This is, I don't know, reckless, whatever else. But if you want to know how Kirby Smart maybe thinks about Marvin Harrison Jr. saying, Javon Bullard hit me too hard, if you want to know how Kirby Smart maybe thinks about that, then we've kind of isolated it now just for posterity's sake, just to sort of preserve, in the future. This is how we think Kirby Smart would maybe like to answer the question if he ever got a chance to. Let's hear it one more time here, very short.
There's nothing worse than listening to somebody make excuses.
There you go. There you go. Can I hear that one more time? Just make sure people got that. This is how we think Kirby Smart might respond to what Marvin Harrison Jr. just said.
There's nothing worse than listening to somebody make excuses.
I tell you what, just in case, 'cause a lot of those people in Columbus, they got their hard of hearing. The whining's been so loud, it's still ringing in their ears. Just in case somebody may have missed this, this is what we think Kirby Smart might say to Marvin Harrison Jr. saying, if only Javon Bullard had done something different other than make a good, clean hit. If only I could have avoided that somehow, some way. This is one more time what we think Kirby Smart would say to that.
There's nothing worse than listening to somebody make excuses.
There is indeed nothing worse than listen to somebody make excuses. And that is Around the Doghouse here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia here today. All right, so we did a lot of recruiting stuff off the top of the program today. There's actually more recruiting stuff a little bit later on. Now, I halfway joked about the Auburn stuff a moment ago. I do think the potential of emergence for Auburn here is actually a real problem for another SEC power not named Georgia. I'll tell you more about why that is. Also, there's interesting news, not related to any kind of visit situation or anything like that, but a Georgia commit is in the news here this weekend. We'll tell you about that, what's going on there on that front. So a lot to do there on that. But before that, a guy that I had a chance to spend the weekend with, at least a little bit of the weekend, I had a great time with. Also, former Georgia coach Mark Richt on hand for that there, too. What a good time that was at the D1 training facility there on Saturday. John Stinchcomb always having a good time hanging out with Dog fans. It was a great way to kind of get our season started, and we're rolling through it. So for now, with that and everything else going on around Georgia football, let's talk to John Stinchcomb here right now on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
All right, so much to talk to John Stinchcomb about. I'm always happy to do that here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. John, before we get there on that, though, just have to kind of just say once again how much fun it was on Saturday. I loved seeing Coach Richt, and obviously I love seeing the outpouring of love that Georgia fans still show to him. That, I think, is an incredible thing and so nice to be able to see. I liked seeing you there as well. David Green, your former teammate, Bakari Rambo, Tim Worley, obviously one of my favorites growing up. It was just such a good time to be around Georgia fans on Saturday, and kind of a great way to kind of get us ready for the season that's on its way. I hope it was as much fun for you as it was for me.
I loved every second of it. One, I loved just being with Coach Rick and other players, just being around him. Such a great man, great coach, so influential, and a very important time in my life. So to be back with him is always a pleasure, and to see the fan adoration that still exists for him was a pleasure for all of us. I also, might I add, I enjoyed being with the rest of the Adams family.
That's right.
Yeah, it was good to be with them too.
My son was there. My daughter was there. Now my son cares a whole lot more about you and Coach Rick. Not like my daughter probably does not care as much about that as the rest of the folks in the building do. But for my son, it was a big thrill to be around you and all those other former Georgia players, and obviously Coach Rick, who he's heard so many great things about. So he was all into all of that, and so our family had a great time. And I'll say this too, John, before we move on. You and I are in kind of a unique position in the fact that we meet a lot more Georgia fans than the average Georgia fan gets to, right? Because we get a chance to do things like this from time to time. And I got to tell you, I never get tired of it. I love seeing the passion that exists amongst UGA fans, especially this time of year, because almost everybody that I talked to was just absolutely in agreement that they're so happy that the season's almost here. It's almost kind of upon us. And I don't know, there's that huge level of enthusiasm, as you would imagine, for this team this upcoming season. And I wish all Georgia fans got the experience that you and I get to have a lot, which is, hanging out, meeting a lot of these Georgia fans and spending time with them. You just realize what a cool thing we have here around Dog Nation, because there is such a special vibe amongst these fans that is just so contagious. And anytime we do an event like this, I always leave so much happier because Georgia fans are just really fun to spend time with.
It's one of the best fan bases in all of sports, and anytime I get an opportunity to look up from interaction with fans and seeing you sign a heavyweight belt was a real highlight for me. So, the fan base was exceptional, as always. I think the excitement leading up to the season is exactly where it should be. The talk of three-peat and just the appreciation of being once again defending national champions is such a point of pride for so many. And it was expressed on Saturday, and it was, I'm sure, just a small representation of what fans across this country are experiencing as Georgia gets ready to go at it once again and chase after that national championship, which they've been able to find with these past couple of years.
So, John, to completely change the subject to something much more negative, I regret to inform you that Ohio State's back at it again. It has been that for the offseason. Ryan Day will not let it go. The whining, the complaining about the hit by Javon Bullard on Marvin Harrison Jr. late in that game. Replay has shown over and over again that it should not have been a penalty, so therefore Day wants to do away with replay since it doesn't validate his feelings. And now you've got Marvin Harrison Jr., who, John, I like. I mean, listen, what Georgia fan does not have respect for Harrison Jr. as a player? Hopefully they all do. He's a terrific player. But unfortunately, he has seen behavior modeled by his coach, Ryan Day, of excuse-making and whining. And now Harrison Jr. is behaving in a manner that's no better. Telling Dennis Dodd this week he would think that if he had not got hurt, Ohio State would have gone on to win that game. To me, John, this is just conduct unbecoming of a championship-level team. Georgia was in a situation back after the 2017 season where you had the Tyler Simmons is on sides, and obviously Georgia fans were very bothered by that, and a lot of times, they still joke about that. Kirby Smart didn't do that. Georgia players didn't do that. They buckled their chin strap. They got back to work, and it'd be nice if Ohio State was capable of the same kind of behavior here. I think it's a real shame the way the Buckeyes have behaved since this Peach Bowl game, and I don't mind telling you that, John.
I can feel your passion, B.A. What's funny is this is a tale as old as time, right? If this, then that, right? If we would have made this play, if, we didn't get hit in the back of the – whatever. Who cares? It did happen. So you can play that game, and every season. I mean, I think back to when we were coming out of college, getting ready for the NFL, and you train with guys from across the country. And there was a couple guys from Tennessee who were saying, well, if we would, well, I don't care, you didn't. So you got to move on. And what's expected really from coaches more than anything is leadership and ability to say that the way it played out is the way it played out. We can't control the past. The only thing we can control is the future. But to see some of these teams, Ohio State, and let's throw Michigan in this boat as well, they can't get over it. And it's, that there's Georgia days, and there's still discussion of, well, we weren't treated fair. Bullcrap. You got to go out there and win. There's never a game that's officiated just the way you want it, or the plays fall the way they should in your mind. That's the nature of the beast, and you've got to be able to, wipe away your tears and move on. And it seems like what's being modeled to so many is this behavior of, this disgruntled, we're going to use it as motivation. Well, you can use whatever kind of motivation you want. The game's not going to change. You lost it, move on.
Let me make a serious point about something in relationship to all this here just for a moment, though, which is I think in all of this you sort of see what makes Georgia Georgia. I'm not talking about the way they talk about things. I'm talking about the fact that if you are one wide receiver injury away from not being able to win a football game, then you're too fragile as a football team. And that's true for Ohio State with Marvin Harrison Jr., and it's true for Alabama with Jamison Williams. Now, Georgia has not had wide receivers of that caliber, not a Jamison, not a Marvin Harrison Jr. But guess what? Brock Bowers is really good. But if Bowers had gotten hurt in whatever game, I don't know that Georgia fans would have been feeling like, well, Georgia's chances of winning this game are completely ruined. And Bowers is a guy who may be a top 5 pick. So from a playmaking standpoint, he's as good as anybody. That what Georgia has built over the course of the last couple of years is this anti-fragile football team. This football team that isn't sort of, there's no nucleus of power that if you kind of took that away, the whole thing would fall apart. There is no one thing that makes the entire organization kind of hum. It's decentralized, right? It's offensive line, but it's also defensive line. It's defensive secondary, but it's also running backs. It's 10 coaches who all have incredible value. That there's this level of power and strength that's sort of spread out across the organization. You couldn't take any one thing away and cripple Georgia. Whereas for a program like Ohio State, Marvin Harrison Jr. is so head and shoulders better than most of the players on that team that if you do take him away, it does seem like Ohio State is kind of somewhat crippled, which sort of speaks to the fragile nature of that football team and the fragile nature of what Alabama was in 2021. As long as it's pristine conditions and everybody's healthy and nobody's playing too rough, then yeah, you've got a great chance to win. But the moment football becomes football, all of a sudden you don't quite feel quite as strong of a team anymore. And that is sort of what has made Georgia Georgia, the fact that they are just as an organization so much less fragile. And I mean that I literally mean, like, that is what has made Georgia Georgia. You couldn't take a player off the team and ruin Georgia's chances of winning a game.
Well, we think we saw that with George Pickens and the fact that he missed so much time, and yet Georgia continued to motor on and recognize that they weren't built just around one player. And, I think similar can be said for A.D. Mitchell. And, there's been a number of guys that have not been available at times, but yet Georgia keeps on humming. And I think that's what separates truly great teams. Now, would any team want their very best players to be out on the field? Yeah, of course. And Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, no different. They are the elite teams. There's the haves and the have-nots, and those programs in particular are the haves. And does that mean that every other team doesn't have a chance? Well, they've got to do things right to even compete. And I think when you're playing against the best, you obviously want your best. But if you are reliant solely on a couple, 1, 2, 3 individuals, and that where they go, your team goes, that's not the recipe for success, and that's not the way Georgia's built. I think where they have won in the Kirby Smart era is that the cupboards are so deep. I mean, you look at the roster, and if you get down to the twos and sometimes threes, you've got guys that are very capable, and that any team across the country would be thrilled to have them out on the field, and that's where you win games. And there's plenty of testament to that as to how it holds true. But the game of football is brutal, and you're not always going to be at 100% roster-wise or as an individual, and you still have to be able to go out there and compete and win games.
John, I'm going to beg your pardon for one thing for 1 second. We've got a lot more we want to do with you, but there's something a moment ago I forgot to do, so let me make sure I do this right now. We'll get back to John Stinchcomb here. I do want to remind you, though, that if you have not submitted a nominee for our Celebrating Outstanding Teachers contest, courtesy of Kroger, this is really the time to do it. In fact, this is your last week to kind of get involved on all of that. So if you go to DawgNation.com, we have made it so easy for you, and you, by virtue of nominating a teacher, could also be a winner there as well, because if your teacher that you nominate wins, you also win. You get a $50 gift card courtesy of Kroger and a DawgNation gift bag, which includes a DawgNation t-shirt and so many cool things. And the teachers who win, they get 4 incredible gift cards there as well. $100 to Kroger, $50 to Home Chef and Bath and Body Works, and also Target there too. So 4 great gift cards going the way of our teachers. The nominators have a chance to be a winner too. Next week, each day, we're going to announce an outstanding teacher courtesy of Kroger. So we're celebrating going back to school. Kroger's on top of all of that. Go to DawgNation.com, nominate a teacher, and let's see if you can be a winner, and let's certainly celebrate some great teachers as we roll into that next week. DawgNation.com for a lot more details on that. John, I apologize for keeping you waiting, but I was derelict in my duties there a moment ago. I want to talk about something else we talked about off the top of the show here a little bit, and that is the reemergence of Auburn as a team that's now trying once again. Now, I'm not trying to be sarcastic when I say that, because the last couple of years, I think Auburn fans themselves were saying that they really have not been trying. I think the boosters around that program disliked Brian Harsin so much, thought he was so below the standard of what an SEC coach was supposed to be. They didn't want to help at all. They wanted to just sort of let him kind of flame out, stay out of the way, and then once the Auburn administrators who had hired him realized how much of an error they had made, they would bring in a new coach. He'd have a little bit more of a tie to the SEC, and they'd kind of get back to the business of football, which is basically what's happening now with Hugh Freeze. So the point that I've kind of tried to make about this is if Georgia's plan for college football dominance requires Auburn not trying, then it's not much of a plan to begin with, because, of course, these SEC rivals are going to try to put their best foot forward there as well. That's kind of what Auburn did this weekend with its Big Cat weekend. Hosted a couple of Georgia commits, hosted a big-time Georgia target, flipped a receiver away from Alabama. Like, they're trying again. They're out there doing everything they could possibly do, and maybe they're using NIL, or maybe they're using early playing time, or maybe they're using whatever, but of course, you're going to use everything at your disposal to try to get back in the race for the top of the SEC. So, I'm not going to tell people it's not real. Of course it's real. Auburn is now trying to field a good football team again, something they probably should have been doing the entire time anyway. But I'm also, as a Georgia fan and as someone who talks to Georgia fans on a daily basis, I'm not all that worried about this from a Georgia standpoint as of yet. This is just the way the SEC is supposed to be. Your rivals are going to try to steal your recruits, and we all have, I think, should have pretty thick skin about all of this. What do you make of the reemergence of Auburn here under Hugh Freeze?
Well, I think the change has been that they've been so irrelevant. That's what's startling to me. Other teams trying to compete and vie for the top recruits is nothing new. You look at Tennessee and Texas A&M in recent years and their desire to be better than what they've been. That's a big piece of it. You got to get the players. You got to have top-notch players. That's one of the best things that Kirby Smart has brought to the University of Georgia is competing annually for the top class of recruits, recognizing that you have to have the best players. If you're going to vie for a national championship on an annual basis, well, you're going to have the guys to do that. And that's nothing new. The cup bearer for years was Alabama, and now it's Georgia. And other teams are going to try to compete for those same players, recognizing we've got to have the best if we're going to have a chance at things. So I think what the storyline was, how unbelievably bizarre it's been that Auburn became a basketball school and just totally forgot that, you know, they were relevant, or at one time relevant in the football sphere. And for them to be returning to that space, or trying to, making an effort, they're so far behind the eight ball now, let's be honest. I mean, a program takes years to develop, and one of the best things that happened is Kirby walked into a place where Georgia was not at rock bottom. And Auburn, I think, was pretty close, if not already there. And that's going to be a tough road to hoe, to rebuild a program that once knew what it meant to be competitive on a national scale and is not anywhere close, or hasn't been these past few years.
And listen, you can say what you want about Hugh Freeze and some of the stuff away from the football field. Obviously, people have said plenty about all that, and I understand why they would. But this is a guy who understands the SEC, right? I mean, it's like you look at the way in which these, navigated the transfer portal ahead of this season. I thought they had a pretty good, kind of rushed late class, when he, kind of first got the job there. He's talked a lot about building on the lines of scrimmage. He obviously understands that's what the SEC, kind of requires. This is a guy that, beat Alabama twice when he was Ole Miss coach. One of the worst losses of the Kirby Smart era was to Hugh Freeze in 2016. Very different version of Georgia football from what it is now, but still it happened. That Hugh Freeze is a living, breathing SEC coach. What's funny is a lot of Auburn fans did not want to hire him because they thought they were going to be embarrassed by some of the off-field stuff, and who knows what the future holds as far as that kind of thing goes. But the only thing I can judge is what he does in the football field. And there's no doubt that Hugh Freeze is of the level of an SEC coach. And from that standpoint, it is a night and day difference from where things were with Brian Harsin.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're not talking about him as a man or some of his off-the-field decisions. Those are very much up for debate. What is not is his ability to compete and coach football. He's a very well-established, a good football coach, and that's what Auburn was buying when they got him. Now, you have to take into account that there's a lot of baggage that he brings with him, but what's not debatable is his ability to coach football and compete and know what it takes to win in the SEC. And the fact that there's a focus on the trenches is a testament to that. I mean, yes, you have to have playmakers. Yes, the game is evolving. Yes, everybody wants a core of wide receivers that are full of playmakers. But at the end of the day, if you can't protect your quarterback or you can't get after the quarterback and stop the run, a lot of those points become pretty moot. And the SEC is at the foreground, in the front of all the leagues and really across college football, saying, that's where we start and we build out from the inside.
A couple quick things. I've kept you long. I don't mean to. I want to get two more issues in before we let you go, if you don't mind. Practice for Georgia officially starts this week. They've been working out, obviously, very hard all summer long, but now it's the true fall camp. If you were there and you could put your eyes in any direction, where would you be looking? What's interesting to you right now about Georgia as it gets ready to get back to work here this week?
Well, I think, I did a little networking thing with some of the players this past week, and they would argue that training camp has already started, whether it's official or not, mini camps and all those things. So, officially it starts Wednesday, I guess, but that's only on paper. Where I would direct my eyes is really across that D line. I'd like to see, as new faces and younger faces emerge, what's that going to look like? Over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of attrition there, obviously with Jordan Davis and now Jalen Carter, the transfer of Bear. I want to see the emergence and the development of some of the younger players. Michael Williams is a guy that, is going to step up and hopefully be one of those names. How about pass rushers off the edge? Marvin Jones, what's that year look like for year two in him with him healthy? There's some guys that I think have some really high ceilings. How about some of the 5-star true freshmen? What do they bring to the table, and what's their role? So, for me, obviously I played offensive tackle, and I want to see how we can affect people up front, and that D-line's kind of an exciting position group to see how it all works out and how it emerges and how they deploy the various personnel groupings, and should be an exciting position group to watch.
And then finally, on a completely different subject, we found out this weekend that Sony Michel is stepping away from his pro football career. And, John, I think he goes down as one of the most beloved Bulldogs of all time. Like, I love Sony Michel. I thought he was so much fun to watch, but he also just handled his business in such a great way at Georgia. Him, obviously Nick Chubb, and those guys who came back for the 2017 season gave us an incredible memory. Like, I don't know how high your highest shelf is, but on my memories, Michel would be on the highest shelf I got. I'm sure you feel pretty close the same way.
Oh, yeah. That 1-2 punch of Nick Chubb and Sony Michel for Georgia fans, that it was hard to mention one without the other. And what he was able to do and mark that he left on Georgia, the program, the school, and the fan base is second to none. I'm grateful for him that he is one of the DGDs.
Yeah.
And congratulations on a great career, 2 Super Bowl championships, and left his mark on the league as well. But I think you can see an appreciation and appreciate for guys that are willing to recognize that it's not just about money. And for him, from what I understand, he's saying, I'm listening to my body, and it's time. And so that's a difficult decision for a lot of folks when they say, there's still opportunity to make some pretty incredible money, but when you can weigh all the options and say my body is telling me something and I need to listen to it, I've got a lot of respect for guys that are willing to make that decision.
No, John, I think that's absolutely right, and I just appreciate that insight. And you obviously, know that yourself from having been in a different position, of course, but in the NFL too, and that desire to keep on playing that game just continues, right? Because I'm sure there's a certain thought of you can't imagine yourself as no longer a player when you've been a player for quite some time, but there also kind of becomes that moment in which, from a health standpoint, it is time to sort of think about your life away from football too, I guess, right?
Oh, yeah, and there's a real pressure, whether internal or external, that if you can, you should. If you can still play, then you should still play. But yet, if your body is saying there's a high toll to it, it's something that really weighs on guys, and it's a big part of many players' identity of, this is me as a football player, who am I without it? And if you can separate those things and recognize it's something that you're able to do and doesn't define you, I think you're much better situated in life to see that it's a unique opportunity, and I'm grateful for it, but isn't defining of who you are.
John, great stuff. Terrific insight. Thanks for your time. We'll look forward to talking to you again next week. At that point, we'll have gotten some information from Georgia out of these early practices, and we'll kind of see where things are shaking out. We'll be that much closer to the start of the season there as well. So we appreciate your time, and we'll look forward to talking to you then.
Always a pleasure. Go Dogs.
Thank you.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
I'm a big baseball fan. I love the movie Moneyball. I'm sure many of you have seen it. And there's that line in the movie. I'll butcher it. I'm not great at remembering specific lines, accurately, but it's something to the effect of, the scout says, hey, at some point we're all told we can no longer play the kids' game, right? For some of us it happens when we're this age, and for some of us it happens when we're, much, much older, but eventually we're all sort of told we can no longer play. And with that in mind, I think a guy like Sony Michel walking away kind of under his own terms here and, kind of making his own decision when to step away, I think there is some real power in that. And obviously I was not an athlete the way that Sony Michel is, so I can't really kind of put myself in his shoes, but I can kind of imagine, right? It's like, like I did a game for Sony in high school, play-by-play broadcast back when he was at American Heritage, like in 2013 or something like that. Was it 2013, 2014? Maybe it's 2014. It's 2014. It's a long time ago, though, right? No, he'd been a freshman at Georgia in 2014, so I guess it wasn't 2013. A long time ago. So, this is a guy who's been a football player in our lives, a great player in our mind for a very long time. And, there is something to be said for when you look around and say, hey, you know what? I've kind of taken a pounding here. I've made a name for myself. My legacy is cemented. I can move on to the next thing. So obviously we wish Sony Michel very, very well in this next chapter. And I'm just telling you, I know Georgia fans would feel the same way. Just thank him. Sincere, heartfelt thanks for just some outstanding memories. In a Georgia uniform, and obviously we're proud of him when he moved on to the NFL there as well. Truly a DGD. Sometimes we debate, is so-and-so a DGD? The debate about Sony Michel and his DGD status, his damn good dog status, that debate would be roughly 1 nanosecond long. That would be a very, very short deliberation in terms of Sony Michel DGD status. I think we would all agree on that. Something that hopefully we all also agree on. And that's a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. We get ready to go cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And the thing I'm excited about, can't wait to tell you more about, we're getting close. In fact, on Saturday, when I was there at D1 training with some great dog fans, a couple came up and they said, hey, we are going on the Dog Nation cruise in April. And so I celebrated with them. We talked about how excited we were. And I told them what I've been telling you, which is that it's truly going to be bigger and better than it's ever been before. Obviously, we've been able to do this a couple times, and it's been super fun. And I think the pressure is on to make it even better in April of 2024. So we're going to meet that moment by being on board an Oasis-class ship. I'm talking about Allure of the Seas, one of the largest cruise ships at sea. We're going to be on it, and we're going to provide bigger and better Dog Nation-themed events for the hundreds of folks who are going to be on board there as well. Now, when you're hearing from all these people who are like, hey, BAF signed up, I'm going to be there, every time somebody says that, that's one less stateroom that we have to offer to you. And there is a limited number. The reason why is because the ship itself sells out, so we have to kind of partition our rooms, kind of hold on to those, so we literally don't have extra inventory on this, because once that's gone, the entire ship's probably also kind of sold out there as well. So you got to be on board. You got to be ready to go. It's going to be a great time. Jessica Slater's a great travel agent. She's got a website that she's put together called RoyalDogs.com. You can go there. You can find out all about it. Boy, it's going to be an awesome time. All right, let us cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean here for a moment. Now, as I told John Stinchcomb a moment ago, and as I told all of you off the top of the show, there is an element to what Auburn did this weekend with its Big Cat Weekend that's real. This is real. This is happening. They are going to probably be a factor in recruiting with Hugh Freeze's coach, which I've kind of been telling you about for a while. They're going to probably be a factor in these kinds of recruiting battles in a way in which they have not been for quite some time. And for Georgia, as of yet, I'm not quite so sure this is all that worthy of too much of your attention. As we said before, the Georgia recruiting machine kind of rolled right on this weekend, no matter what Auburn was doing. Noisy, loud, boisterous. Georgia, kind of quiet, calm, and collected, was taking a good linebacker commit, hosting some good visitors. So everything's kind of fine on the Georgia front. Let me tell you who ought to be a little tighter around the collar right now. That's Alabama. What's happening in Alabama as it relates to Auburn is probably worth your attention, because guess what? As we told you, whatever day it was, Thursday of last week, whenever it was, the fact that Alabama rolled out the red carpet for DeMarcus Riddick, limo ride, or not quite limo, but fancy car ride to the front of the stadium for A-Day and all the other stuff they rolled out for him. The fact that Auburn just took him like it was their job. If I'm Alabama, that makes me a little nervous. And then you got Perry Thompson, big-time wide receiver out of Foley, Alabama. This is a 5-star receiver. Had been an Alabama commit. Auburn just flipped him just like that this weekend. Watch out for this. Be careful about this. This is the thing, if I'm an Alabama fan, I'm noticing, is that, Georgia's so far out in front of the rest of college football right now that, some tiny rumblings coming out of Auburn, some tiny, little ripples coming out of Auburn, that doesn't quite get Georgia's attention as of yet. Maybe one day it will. Auburn certainly hopes that it does. Someone's going to emerge as a rival to Georgia. That's just the way the SEC goes. Someone eventually will build something to try to compete alongside Georgia. That's going to happen eventually, you would think. Maybe it'll be Auburn. Who knows? It's not relevant to UGA too much as of yet. My gosh, it's relevant to Alabama here right now. Now, the sea change doesn't occur overnight. It doesn't. There's still a built-in advantage Alabama has over Auburn. But Auburn is doing more than just getting noticed in comparison to Alabama. They're taking players that Alabama wants. And, while Nick Saban was, gallivanting around Italy, Hugh Freeze was working, right? And you're seeing some fruit of that work being done by Hugh Freeze here. This is real. This is a thing that's happening. And if you're an Alabama fan, you ought to notice, and especially when it comes to a guy like Thompson, who plays a position that Alabama's had such great success with. The fact that that's who Hugh Freeze is taking here. If I'm an Alabama fan, I ought to be paying attention to this. And I don't know. I think the Iron Bowl this year has gotten a lot more interesting now because of the presence of Hugh Freeze. And this is the way that it probably should be in the SEC, but this is the way that it is right now there when it comes to all that. Speaking of recruiting conversation, let's keep that going there as well. When you look at the next story that I think that needs to be on your mind, which is we now have a date for the Nate Frazier commitment. It's going to be August 6th. That's the day after KJ Bolden goes on August 5th. And Frazier's one of those guys. We talked to Jeff Sentell about this on Friday when he was on the show. Frazier is a guy that Georgia fans have obviously grown to really like here. And so watching what happens with this over the course of the next week, going to be a really big deal, big-time running back. We now know the date in which Frazier will announce it's going to be August 6th, and everybody's going to be paying very close attention to this. We'll see how the narrative evolves as you head towards that, but a big date that ought to be on your mind there. And then finally there's this, once again kind of on the recruiting front here, Georgia wide receiver commit Nitro Tuggle, who was supposed to go to IMG Academy. He put something out on Twitter this weekend, and this is like more of like a procedural thing than a football thing, but something related to, I guess, IMG's changed management companies now, and all of a sudden now that I guess he was going to be like a one-semester transfer just for football. They don't really do that anymore, he said, so he's got to go back to Indiana where he was from. I don't know this is necessarily that big of a deal one way or another. I was looking forward to seeing Tuggle playing for IMG from the standpoint that this is a guy who's kind of rocketed up those recruiting boards and obviously playing with the IMG spotlight on him, playing and getting that sort of extra level of attention for that could have allowed that to continue. Maybe it still continues there in Indiana. We just may see less of him up there in the Hoosier State than we would have if he had stayed down there in Bradenton there at IMG Academy. I don't know if this is a great look for IMG, for a guy that thought he was going to be able to go there, and all of a sudden now he's not going to be able to go there. That seems like a little bit of a weird thing for IMG, but I guess they've got a business to run, so they're going to do that the way they want to. But Tuggle is one of those guys, as Georgia fans have been kind of left to wonder, okay, what is this current status of, wide receiver recruiting and all this stuff related to, big names that you thought Georgia might be involved with, that maybe now they're not quite as involved with as you wish they would have been, and whatever's going on there on that. Tuggle's been one of those guys that Georgia fans have reconsidered here because you've seen him really climb the recruiting rankings and, really kind of become a pretty valued recruit here. But maybe not being an IMG Academy kind of takes the spotlight off him here a little bit. But, that's a story that's out there. Wanted to make you aware of that. We'll make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And something else I want you to be aware of there as well. A brand new offering from our friends at Dr. Pepper. You've heard me talk about this before. Dr. Pepper Strawberries and Cream. Now listen, I love Dr. Pepper, and it has been so much fun watching people get introduced to this brand new permanent flavor offering from Dr. Pepper. Dr. Pepper Strawberries and Cream and Dr. Pepper Strawberries and Cream Zero Sugar. Nobody does the zero sugar offerings better than our friends at Dr. Pepper do. They're just legendary at that. And obviously, we think about Dr. Pepper, kind of being around college football for a long time. And obviously, we're coming up on an upcoming new season. And so, a great time to get stocked up on Dr. Pepper Strawberries and Cream and Dr. Pepper Strawberries and Cream Zero Sugar here today. It's at your local Kroger or pretty much wherever you do your grocery shopping. You can find some Dr. Pepper Strawberries and Cream and Dr. Pepper Strawberries and Cream Zero Sugar. Make sure you try some today. All right, Golden Shoe today is related to the Sony Michel retirement. Somebody shared this tweet with me. I wanted to share it with you. I thought this was really fun, coming from the dean of the Grady School there at UGA, Charles Davis, writing on Twitter. So in response to the idea that Sony Michel's retiring, Charles N. Davis on Twitter writes that Sony showed up for an event that the Grady School of Journalism was hosting the Monday after the Georgia-Florida game. He stayed there for a while. He says he was gracious and caring, as you expected he would be. And then Charles Davis says, I asked him if he was tired, and he said, this is a great line, he says, no, they never hit me. So certainly you get a golden shoe for that if you're Sony Michel, and obviously Charles Davis, who shared the story of Sony Michel saying after playing Florida in 2017, no, I'm not tired at all. They never even laid a hand on me. If you remember that game, you know how true that is. So very good stuff and fitting way to end Sony Michel's football career there. How about the lousy, stinking Gators? Will they lay a hand on Georgia this year? We don't think so either. In fact, our Gator Hater countdown lets you know that 89 days from now, Georgia back in Jacksonville, beating up on Florida. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella, Window and Door of Georgia. We'll look forward to talking to you then. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews cool down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can trust them on all of that. So we'll take your comments here and find out what you got going on and look forward to having a good time with you. And we'll see how you're doing. Let me go to YouTube here first. Going to get things kicked off. Let's see what else. Let's see what folks doing. Obviously, G. Grayson here stirring it up. The Biscuit says Gators football history is basically 1990 through 2008. Nothing before that, nothing since then. That's about right. That's about right. Senio G checking in. Boy, we hadn't seen him in a minute. Good to see him back in the comment section. Glad to see that. That's awesome. Offers writes in to say, so right, BA, Auburn has the money bags dropping and any recruit being so short-sighted isn't a Bulldog quality recruiter player. They're trading a great future for a cheap bag. Yeah, obviously the long-term financial gain better than short-term stuff. You know, Auburn's going to be throwing around, we would imagine, some real money. The rumors are not, well-kept secrets that, they had a big war chest they were not choosing to use during the Brian Harsin era. They're obviously going to use that here right now, and that's going to make them a factor. It's going to make him a factor. Foster Moss said Sony Michel did more in 5 years in the NFL than most folks could do in a 15-year career, which is certainly pretty good there, too. Wally Smith wondering about Williams Nwaneri. Yeah, that's a guy we're watching for. Is it August 7th? Is it 5th, 6th, and 7th on them? Is that the right date for Nwaneri? It's early August, whenever it is. And you hear about Missouri. I guess Missouri chatter over the weekend. You hear about the stuff with Oklahoma. And yeah, I think still view Georgia to be a factor there too. Georgia's really in the mix kind of late here for 3 defensive linemen. Nwaneri on 3 ranks him as the top recruit in the country. McCray out of Florida, and then Breland out of California. Croking says he thinks that Nwaneri's going to go to Missouri. There was some Missouri talk here this weekend, and I think I said this to you last week that you ever play like fantasy football, you kind of got that stars and scrubs type deal going on there where you can put a lot of money towards one recruit when you really can't get a full class in place. And obviously that's probably what Missouri did with Luther Burden, and maybe they'll do the same thing with Williams Nwaneri here. It's like they can't win with them all, but can they win with a big one in a kind of an in-state type situation? Yeah, maybe they could, and maybe the locals a little bit more motivated to want to pony up in a situation like that. Let's see what else is going on. We'll take some more comments. I'm getting a message here from our producer, Michael Carvel. Let me see if I can get my phone open. I'll read that, see what that is. Oh, wow. How about that? We streamed in, 1080 today, so you can see the freckles on BA's face. There you go. So we went from 720 to 1080. So there you go. That's exciting. So that may be more of me than you want to see, but there you go. Exciting indeed. Let's see what else. BA's Ty Stone Cold Style says 2021 was humble and pleasurable. After 2022, we all have this chip on our shoulder because everywhere you look, trolls crying like Ryan Day. Yeah, Georgia's on top of the college football world, and Georgia fans get to decide how benevolent of a dictatorship they want to run. And if Georgia fans don't want to be gracious, that's their choice, because when you're on top, you get to be how you want to be. Now, as they say in NASCAR, how you race is how you get raced. So, Georgia fans in a lot of ways are sort of responding to what has kind of been done to them in the past. And I'm sure if Georgia ever stumbles and falters, there'll be plenty of people ready to rub it in Georgia fans' faces too. But that's the way that it goes. Let's see what else. I like it when G. Grace and Nature Gator team up like an Axis of Evil. I like it when they team up. That's always funny to me. DMart 42's talking about rumor mill that Georgia won't be beaten out financially speaking for Winery. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, certainly the Ohio State fans, that's something else they've whined about, was getting money whipped for Damon Wilson, they believe anyway. So there's definitely some of that. Foster Moss says, are you hyped for the start of the season? It says, since we're playing a cupcake, it seems like the hype isn't there like for Clemson or Oregon. Well, there's no doubt it's not there like it would have been for a Clemson or Oregon. There's no doubt about that. But there will, I think, be some things that kind of get us excited. Now, that's a different type of deal. I mean, we're going to probably be, if you're just honest about this, so we'll be heavy into who's playing and, how Georgia's rotating. If Georgia goes out and puts like 60 on the board, I guess that'll get people kind of excited. But the honest truth is week 1 and week 2, we're probably talking more about LSU, Florida State, and Alabama, Texas than we are the other things. But early season, doesn't mean the South Carolina game won't be worth paying attention to. I believe that it will be. The Auburn game obviously takes on extra importance now, just given the fact that, Auburn's kind of fired up there. That I think there's a lot that sort of kind of gets you, fired up about, what can happen early season. But it's not week 1. You're right about that. It's not week 1. Jerry Dog fan talking about some of the guys they've been missing for Georgia. Yeah, I mean, obviously big-time players for Georgia were taken off the field, either because of injury or other things, and, Georgia found a way to overcome all that. All right, so Dimitri Sullivan, I didn't mention this in the show because this is not just typically the kind of content that we do, but Dimitri's right about this. I heard this is true. He says, is it true that Clemson dismissed the linebacker who transferred to Ole Miss because he was – so – the rumor out there is, and I guess it's I don't know if it's a rumor report, but the chatter is that he may have been posting from the Clemson locker room onto OnlyFans. Now, if you don't know what OnlyFans is, you don't need to hear that from me. You need to figure that out on your own. But like that to me, of all the things you'd ever talk about, like the sanctity of the locker room, like nothing violates the sanctity of the locker room more than that, right? Like that's outrageous. And, I mean, if this is true, the way it's been reported, like, what is Ole Miss doing taking him on its roster? Like, I don't feel like you can do that. I mean, to me, that ought to be, I don't know. I mean, I don't know the player. I don't know the situation. I just know the reports. Like, if that were true, that's the big if, obviously, because all these are just, I guess, allegations, I guess. But, man, you can't be posting pictures from the locker room anywhere. Like, I don't like it when, how like the big celebration, like a lot of times now you'll see the players, they'll go live on Instagram or something like that, and they'll, kind of go live from the locker room. I don't even like doing that. Now, I'm not, the police here, so I'm not going to tell people what they can and cannot do. But to me, there's a certain sanctity of the locker room. I especially don't think, to me, that's the most egregious violation of anything I've ever seen. Cannot do that. Cindy OG says he needs to be put in jail for that. But seriously, I mean, like, there is a way of looking at that and saying that's assault, right? There is a way in which you could kind of say that was maybe I don't know. It's hard to talk about all this in the confines of a show like ours, but I feel like there is a way of describing that would certainly make that sound like assault. Dog Daddy says, I'm turning 2,000, but I don't look a day over 1825. He says, daily, Wayback Machine. Yeah, Dog Daddy's one of these that's been with us for a long time, which I love. For sure. RB Media says, this is a different generation. I guess so, man. I guess so. I don't know. To me, that's one of the worst things I've ever heard. That's one of the worst. If that's true, that's one of the worst things I've ever heard. And I don't know how you could welcome him into another locker room. I mean, if I was one of those players, I have a lot of questions. Plus, it's like, how do you even do that? Like this deal, right? Like how do you even do the I don't like all of that. Just seems really weird. Bill Sanders on the subject of the Braves sweeping the Brewers. Listen, I thought the Braves needed a good weekend. I thought they got one. Now, the pitching's not great, of course, but they scored, almost 30 runs? 30 runs, more, maybe 11 home runs. I mean, this is what Atlanta is. This is like the 99 Rams of Major League Baseball. They are here to slug their way to victories. They are not going to outpitch you right now. They're not. Now, maybe, Fried comes back, something like that, maybe get a little help. But this is a team that's going to try to slug its way to victory. Adam Henderson, no, I have no plans of starting an OnlyFans. If feeding my family required me being successful on OnlyFans, I believe we'd all probably starve to death because I doubt anybody has any interest in seeing me on OnlyFans. I doubt that's the case. Barry Watkins also talking about some of the big trade stuff that's gone down. Listen, Texas Rangers, they're going all in, man. Woo, boy. They're trading left and right. Matthew Goodwin says, if you read the teacher entries, my wife should win. Middle school teacher with her doctorate, varsity coach, bus driver, college professor, and most importantly, a dog fan, hardest working person I know. Boy, it sounds like that. Now, Matthew, I do have to confess, is the one thing I stay far away from. Legal, of course, won't let me do this, but I stay far away from any of the selection of any of our contest entries because that's probably a level of involvement I don't need. But it does sound like, Matthew, she is a very, very deserving winner. I talked to a guy this week, too, who's kind of telling me about his mom there as well, how deserving of a winner she would be. She's also got her doctorate. That's what made me think about that. But, yeah, Matthew, it sounds like she would truly be a very deserving winner, and I hope she does win. I do. That'd be awesome. Let's see what else. Mark Goodman says Ohio State recruits 5-star receivers like no one, and they complain of losing one that cost them the game. Next man up. Yeah, that's what it should be. I mean, I don't know, man. It's like, receiver is obviously a really important position. It's gotten more important in recent years, but, you're still lining up way away from the football. The action's near the middle of the field where the ball is, and that's where Georgia's going to be its strongest. Oh, how about this? So Craig Jones says that David Pollock is going to be speaking at his church, Southside Warner Robins, at 10 a.m. on September 3rd. That's obviously a Sunday. Hope some fans can join us. He says ESPN kind of freed up his schedule. Boy, that's really, really something. David is in a venue like that, I'm sure it'd be outstanding. Craig, that's a really, really cool thing. Thank you for letting me know about that. Very, very cool thing. I know y'all be thrilled to hear from him. Doug Rayburn asking about Sammy Brown. I don't know. I mean, it's obviously right down the road. Those Clemson guys don't decommit very much. I did see Sammy Brown on whatever day last week. He looked good shape. He's big. He's really, got some good weight on him right now. DeMont Smith asking about future Big Ten expansion. So Florida State obviously wants out of the ACC, but my belief is they can want whatever they want. I don't believe they're capable of breaking that contract. I just don't think they are. If they could, they already would have. So they can talk about how much they want to do this and they want to do that, but most of the ACC would not have a landing spot if the ACC dissolved. So, it is obviously in Florida State's best interest to probably get out of that media rights deal that holds the ACC together, but the majority of the league members would not benefit from the ACC disbanding, so they're going to hold it together. See, if Florida State want to try to break the contract, the price they'd have to pay to leave the conference is so expensive that it basically prohibits them from doing so, right? It's like, you can't break contract. People break contracts all the time, but the penalty for breaking this contract is so high that Florida State legally probably just can't do it. I'm sure they've had lawyers looking through every dot and tittle of that contract, trying to figure out a way to get out of it, but I just don't think they're going to be able to. Otherwise, they already would have. So would the Big Ten like to add Florida State? My guess is they probably would. But the ACC media rights deal is in place for a long time. I just don't think that's going to happen. And like as far as the Oregon-Washington thing goes, Oregon and Washington would love to go to the Big Ten, but the Big Ten right now I don't believe wants them. I just don't think it does because like we're in kind of a weird place for conference expansion right now where it's like if you bring in new league members to any league, that new league member has got to bring in extra value to your league. Like Colorado going to the Big 12 brought in probably extra value in two ways. First of all, it weakened the Pac-12, which, kind of gives the Big 12 a chance to take on more teams in the future. But what the Pac-12 and the Big 12 have going for it is that they have these West Coast schools or Western-ish schools that can play games at 9 p.m. Pacific, or I should say 9 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. Eastern. That's a lot of value to ESPN, to Fox, to say, okay, we'll pay you money because we like that extra late window on Saturday. There's good business to be done there. And so if you're the Big 12, you'd love to have Colorado and Arizona and schools like that. I don't know that you're getting Arizona State and Utah right now, but you might could get Arizona. And there's good value in that because you can play these games late and have extra value to an ESPN or a Fox or something like that. So for the Big 12, it's no-brainer that you'd want Colorado because they bring that in. The Big Ten's already got the late window because they've got USC, UCLA. Now, those schools most be playing earlier, but they're already out west. They have L.A. The idea of adding an Oregon or a Washington, those are programs that have some value, but from the Big Ten perspective, they don't bring extra value. So right now, the Big Ten doesn't want them. Would Florida State, if it was open and available, be extra value to the Big Ten? It probably would. It would give them an access to a part of the country they're not currently in. I'm sure they'd probably like that. But Florida State cannot break this contract with the ACC, the best I can possibly tell. Because if they could, they already would. Let's see what else. Let's see what else. Yeah, a lot of talk about KJ Bolden here about what's next for him. Yeah, listen, the one thing about KJ is he keeps them guessing. He keeps all of us guessing. And, it's kind of an old school recruitment from that standpoint. Michael Penn checks in to say, it was great to meet you too, Michael. Thank you so much for being out there. I had such a good time. And I talked to John earlier about some great Georgia fans. Michael, an example of that. Just so much fun hanging out with those good dog fans and enjoying ourselves. Just really get you ready for the upcoming season, get you excited about all that kind of stuff. I just can't wait for it to be here. Peter Wilson, thank you very much for the kind words. Appreciate that. Greg Baker asked a question. He says, are we heading towards 2 or maybe 3 super conferences in college football? The SEC, the Big Ten, and then the ones who didn't quite fit into the first 2. Yeah, I mean, obviously the Pac-12 is going to be in a real fight for survival right now. I think the ACC, within the next decade, is probably facing the same kind of fight. So you're going to see some of that attrition, but, like, I don't know how much bigger the SEC or the Big Ten want to be, right? It's like, does if the SEC could, would it want 30 members? I don't know that it sees a lot of value in that. So, like the Big Ten, from that standpoint, is, I think, making some pretty smart and shrewd moves here because more so than any of the other Power 5 leagues not named SEC or Big Ten, they've probably done the most to kind of ensure their survival. So, is it Brett Yormark? Is it Yormark? Is that his name? Yormark, the commissioner? I think he probably deserves some credit for how he's handled all this. Let's see what else. Barry Watkins says KJ Bolden's playing games. And as I've kind of said, I have a pretty high tolerance for some of that kind of stuff pre-signing day, especially if there's a financial incentive for him for doing that. I don't get too worked up over that necessarily. I mean, I want KJ to come to Georgia. I'll be disappointed if he doesn't. But, if he wants to make every school in the world feel like they're a major factor in it, and right now that sort of seems to be what he wants to do, I would say that's his kind of prerogative to do that right now, I guess. I don't get too bothered by that. Bill Russell says Bama will beat LSU and Tennessee but lose to Texas and Auburn. Can the Vols win more than 9 games this year? It's going to be an exciting year watching the league decide who's going to lose Georgia in the SEC championship. Yeah, Bill, that's really well said. And the Tennessee thing is really fascinating to me because, Tennessee, I've got losing at least twice before it plays to Georgia, losing to Georgia and going, I guess, 9-3. But, they're a small favorite at Florida. This is the kind of example of the kind of game that Tennessee is going to be playing a good bit of, which is, we think of Tennessee as a good team. We think of Florida as a bad team. But when you put Tennessee on the road at Florida, all of a sudden now you start bringing in a point spread situation here where you're kind of inside of a touchdown there in that spot. And in a one-score college football game, anything can happen. Somebody gets a paw on a football, a funny-shaped ball takes a funny bounce, and all of a sudden all kinds of crazy stuff goes down. So Tennessee, to me, is a gigantic swing team. To me, it's a little bit like you play golf, you have a dispersion rate. Like PGA Tour golfers have a dispersion rate. Even the really good ones that hit the ball super straight, every now and then it goes this way, and every now and then it goes that way because there's a dispersion rate. Now, for those of us who are bad golfers, and I doubt any of you are worse than I am, we also have a linked dispersion rate too. It's like sometimes you really stripe it and it goes exactly how far you want it to do. Sometimes you kind of, top it and it sort of sculls it even farther than you want it to. And sometimes you kind of, sort of get underneath it and it doesn't go quite as far. Like there's just certain inconsistency with some of that. Well, I think for Tennessee this season, there's a pretty big dispersion rate for what the team can be. They're going to begin the year somewhere 15th, 16th in the country, and there's a way that the ball could bounce where that's a team that kind of gets inside the top 10. I mean, I don't believe they'll win at Alabama, but we would also say right now Alabama isn't unbeatable. I think they'll lose at least one other game. I've got a game against Texas A&M circled, a game against South Carolina possibly circled there too. But those are also the kinds of games that if Tennessee's anywhere near as good as it was a year ago, they could win those there as well. So Tennessee could be as good as 10-2. I think they could be as bad as 8-4. Like there's a pretty wide dispersion where I think they could be. Senior Dog 54 says he saw Ric Flair hawking a new energy drink on Saturday night on Fox. Am I in on that? Listen, the Nature Boy is selling and I might be buying it, although I'm not quite so sure I'd actually drink it. I might buy it and put it on the shelf, but I'm not quite so sure I'm drinking that. DT says the ACC and the Pac-12 are going to merge and call themselves the Coastal Elites Conference. That's actually really funny. DT. I like that. Let's see what else. Cam Hasty bringing back a blast from the past. I'm not quite so sure I can go there on that, but yeah, a blast from the past there on that. Dogs on Top says congratulations on a big milestone tomorrow. Won't be able to listen live as I'll be on the air during the show. It's been a wonderful ride so far. Thank you very much, Dogs. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. That's really nice to hear. I really, really appreciate that. DT says, I wonder how Dom Lovett was motivated to leave Missouri based on the money being thrown around to Luther Burden. Yeah, I'm not quite so sure about that, but obviously Georgia's glad to have him. It's a good question. Good question. All right, a few more comments. We're going to get ready to get off the air. Richard D says, adding to Marvin Harrison crying, he went out with only 35 seconds in the third quarter with 0 receptions despite being targeted. Yeah, his production sort of dropped off in that game, kind of prior to the injury. That is certainly a fair point. All right, final comments here. Crow King 123 also liked the idea of the Coastal Elites Conference. That's really funny. Court Michelle liked the NASCAR reference there. I appreciate that, Court. Thank you very much. Paul Moon says, I don't blame any of these kids for enjoying the ride. They only get to do it once. Yeah, I think that's the case. And it is a pressure-packed decision, right? I mean, for a 5-star like KJ Bolden or somebody else, it's like, I talk to a lot of high school players, and they're just dealing with a lot. And I don't think we properly appreciate the fact that a lot of them are just sort of spending time wondering, hey, is the promise being made to me one that's going to be kept? It's like, think about a high school kid who is told, hey, come here and we'll gray shirt you. You can go on scholarship a year from now. Like, it's a big commitment to say I'm going to go somewhere, I'm going to pay my way for a year, and then when that year is done, hopefully they're going to, go ahead and put me on scholarship like they said they were going to. It's like, it's like for a lot of these kids, they have to spend a lot of time thinking about that. That's one of the reasons why I don't know. I have a pretty high tolerance for a lot of what goes on in recruiting kind of prior to the big commitment announcement because, I think the audience has a tendency to see the small handful of players at the top of the recruiting process. They're like, too much drama, cultivating all that kind of drama. But, the larger story involving the, hundreds and hundreds of kids that were going to try to play major college football, it's actually a good bit different than when you kind of broaden it out a little bit. Dog's daddy says that he used to be BA's daddy in the comment section. He says he changed the name when my actual real father passed away. Well, I have great memories of the old BA's daddy in the comment section for sure, and obviously I miss my own real father. Yeah, so I knew Dog Daddy had been with us for a long time, and you're a great commenter, and I appreciate that. And obviously, I like all of our folks, the ones that have just joined us, the ones that have been with us for a long time. But there'll always be special memories about some of the folks who kind of helped us get this part of this started, right? Taking the comments and hanging out and getting a chance to do what we do. Always great memories on all that kind of stuff. So I appreciate that, Dog Daddy. Thank you very much. That's really cool. Let's see what else. Yeah, Wally Smith says not too much longer for football. Can't wait for that. Court Michelle was also asking about that too. First game coming up here. Is it September 3rd? Is that Saturday, September 3rd? Yeah, we're getting there. Getting there close. It's going to be here before you know it. Let me go back over to Facebook. We'll get ready to wrap up here in just a minute. William Camacho says Kirby Smart will never make excuses because he's the hunter and will never be hunted. That's exactly right. No doubt about that. Bill Sanders liked the Ric Flair flop, the one where he's like, walking and just falls face first. That's a good move for sure. Let's see what else. Sandy Price also pointing out that when Georgia lost Alabama in 2017, Kirby didn't make excuses, just got right back to work, which you love to see. Joseph Kennedy, speaking of folks who've been with us for a long time, says, does Georgia still have a shot with Zach Evans? So there you go. Yeah, that's one of these days we're going to make a list of all the guys that we've sort of spent a lot of time talking about that probably ended up not being worth the conversation we gave them. That would certainly be one of those. Mike Mazzell says, from the Natty until right now, we've talked for months about getting ready for opening day. Now we're closer to start raining dogs. Done on everybody in college football. It's, again, the year of the dogs. Boy, I love that, Mike. That's great stuff. Thank you very much. That's great stuff. Dwayne Hudson checking in from Hawaii, where it is still very much early in the morning there. Went to Hawaii for my honeymoon. It was pretty weird. Like, you're 6 time zones apart. 5 times. Yeah, 6 time zones apart. Like, you're 2 time zones west of the Pacific time zone, which is crazy. So, yeah, that's a different kind of deal right there. Faison Cecil says, I don't trust any recruit that's still taking visits to other schools. There are a lot of coaches, a lot of programs that feel that way. That kind of stuff doesn't bother me quite as bad. It doesn't, because I want Georgia to also host recruits who are committed elsewhere too. So, you got to kind of be okay with that door swinging both ways. As long as they end up in the right place when it's all said and done, I don't care a ton about what they do prior to that. But I get the point you're making, though. I do. All right, final comments. D-Mart 42 is going to be at the UT Martin game, the Georgia-Florida game, and hopefully the national title there in Houston. D-Mart, I love that. Crow King 123 says, Mason Smith, think we land him. Now, that's one we did talk about a lot that probably, I believe, is going to turn out to somewhat seem like it's worth it, because Mason was hurt last year. I think he's going to be a good player this year. One of the better players in the SEC. But, yeah, we talked a ton about Mason Smith for sure. Ton about him. Memphis Dog says there was a cartoon, Augie Doggy and Doggy Daddy, which goes back to, I guess, so that's actually a cartoon I used to watch with my dad a good bit when I was very young. So, like, it's kind of a weird story, but, like, it was at my grandparents' house with my dad. We just kind of watched some cartoons in the afternoon. That was one of the ones we'd watch. Augie Doggy and Doggy Daddy. We did do that. We did indeed. I hadn't thought about that in a while, but that is something we did used to watch. Let's get a couple more. We'll get ready to get out of here. BA style, Stone Cold style. Can we play the Kirby Smart No Excuses one more time? Just as a quick reminder. Nice and short for the Ohio State fans to remember because BA style, Stone Cold style asked for it. Here you go.
There's nothing worse than listening to somebody make excuses.
There you go.
There's nothing worse than listening to somebody make excuses.
There's no doubt that's true. There you go, Stone Cold style, just because you asked for it. All right, good stuff. We got to get ready to go. Y'all check out our friends at RS Andrews online at rsandrews.com. Talk to Dari Payro. We got some fun stuff potentially in store for the upcoming season, and Dari's actually kind of led the way on a lot of this kind of stuff. So all the more reason to check him out for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. If your water heater goes out, in many cases, RS Andrews can replace it for you the same day. So make sure you find them online at rsandrews.com. Have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. 2000th episode. We're excited about it. We'll see you then for that here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Talk to you then, everybody.